The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. "Mom, it's Tessa. I have news." My voice was probably a little too high-pitched, a little too eager. I was still buzzing from Imran's proposal, the diamond catching the light on my left hand. A pause stretched, thick with expectation. "What is it?" Her voice, Elizabeth's voice, was already sharp, like she knew it wouldn't be good news. I took a deep breath, picturing her perfectly coiffed hair, her perpetually disapproving gaze. "Imran proposed," I blurted out, unable to hold it in. "I said yes." Silence again. This time, it felt like a physical wall. Then, cold as ice, her words cut through the line. "To him? You'll regret this. Goodbye." A click. The dial tone hummed in my ear, mocking me. "I'm Tessa, 32 years old, and that was my mother, Elizabeth, 59, hanging up on me." My fiancé, Imran, 34, was beside me on the sofa, his hand immediately on my back. He didn't need to ask what happened. He just squeezed my shoulder, his dark eyes full of a quiet understanding that Elizabeth never offered. It wasn't the first time her words had cut me deep. For as long as I could remember, Elizabeth's love had come with conditions, wrapped in criticism. My clothes, my career choices, my friends, nothing was ever quite right. When I was 22, fresh out of college, and still trying to earn her approval, she'd convinced me to put her house in my name. "Just temporarily, darling," she'd purred, "for the bank loan. You know how these things are." I'd signed the papers, trusting her, believing she'd sort it out and transfer it back. She never did. It was just another one of her subtle guilt trips, another way to keep me tethered, financially and emotionally. Now, with the phone cold in my hand, the rejection was a familiar ache, but something else was stirring too. A hardening, a realization. I'd always lived trying to appease her, trying to earn a love that was always just out of reach. But now, with Imran, I'd chosen myself. I felt for the first time truly alone in this fight. Or was I? The dial tone had barely faded before the hurt in my chest started to morph. It wasn't just rejection anymore. It was a cold, simmering anger. 10 years I'd let her string me along, using that house as a leash. I pushed myself off the sofa, the quiet support from Imran a steady anchor. "I need to find something," I mumbled, heading for the old filing cabinet in our spare room. It was crammed with relics from my past, things I'd moved out of Elizabeth's house years ago. Deep in a dusty folder, beneath old tax returns and expired warranties, I found it. The property deed. My name, Tessa Porter, clear as day, as the legal owner. Fingering the crisp paper, the memory came back in a rush. I was 22, naive, and desperate for my mother's approval. She'd claimed she needed to secure a new bank loan for renovations, but her credit wasn't good. "Just for a little while, darling," she'd pleaded, her eyes wide and innocent. "Once the loan goes through, I'll transfer it back, and of course, I'll pay you back for your help." The help was a significant sum she'd convinced me to put towards the loan, a sum she'd promised to repay within a year. A decade later, I hadn't seen a penny, and the house was still mine on paper while she lived in it, rent-free, acting like it was hers. Imran walked in, leaning against the doorframe. "You okay?" I looked up, the deed clutched in my hand. "No, but I'm going to be." My voice was steadier than I expected. "She used me, Imran. She always has." He nodded, stepping closer. "Then you need to do what you need to do for yourself, Tessa, for closure." He didn't push, just offered the space for me to decide. My decision was already made. I pulled out my phone and searched for a number I hadn't called in years. Lloyd Fox, the family lawyer, a man in his 60s who'd handled my parents' divorce and every minor legal squabble since. He was an old friend of Elizabeth's, but he was also a professional. I explained the situation, my voice tight with a resolve that surprised even me. "I want to sell the house, Lloyd, the one my mother lives in." He paused, then sighed. "Tessa, are you sure about this? Your mother... I'm sure, I cut him off. Legally, it's mine. I want to sell it. He agreed to start the process, his tone laced with a concern I chose to ignore. The call ended, and a strange mix of fear and exhilaration buzzed through me. Minutes later, my phone rang again. It was Amara, my younger sister, 28, her voice frantic. Tessa, Mom just called me. She said you're engaged to Imran. What's going on? She sounds upset, and she said something about you doing something big. What is it? Amara's frantic call hung in the air, a familiar echo of my mother's manipulation. Elizabeth hadn't called me back, not once, since hanging up on my engagement news. Instead, she'd deployed her loyal lieutenant. Mom's just being dramatic, Amara, I said, trying to keep my voice even. There's nothing big going on. But even as I said it, the lie felt heavy. I couldn't bring myself to tell Amara about the house yet. She was too enmeshed with Elizabeth, too quick to take her side. Dramatic? Tessa, she's really upset. She said you're trying to hurt her. You know she's struggling, right? That house is all she has. Amara's voice was laced with genuine concern, but also that familiar undertone of guilt-tripping that Elizabeth had perfected. She's struggling because she chooses to be, Amara, I retorted, my patience wearing thin. And that house isn't all she has. It's a house that legally is mine, and she's been living in it for free for 10 years after promising to pay me back a substantial sum she never did. Amara went silent. What are you talking about? I sighed. It's complicated. Just tell Mom to call me if she wants to talk. I knew she wouldn't. After the call, I felt a fresh wave of torment. My sister's words, even though I knew they were Elizabeth's, still pricked at my conscience. That house is all she has. Was I really doing the right thing? Imran, sensing my distress, tried to comfort me. You're doing what's best for you, Tessa. She put you in this position. But his words, meant to soothe, only ignited a spark of anger. You don't understand, Imran, I snapped, pulling away. You don't know what it's like to have your mother use guilt as a weapon, to feel like you owe her everything, even when she's bleeding you dry. This isn't just about a house. It's about a lifetime of this. It was our first real argument, his face falling as my frustration boiled over. He just looked at me, hurt. Later that week, Lloyd called to say he'd started the preliminary paperwork. He mentioned that Elizabeth had been using the house as collateral for small personal loans, things that weren't affecting the main mortgage, but were tying up the property in other ways. More exploitation. More proof she saw it as her personal piggy bank. A few days after that, I drove past the house, a detached, almost clinical curiosity guiding me. I hadn't been inside in months. As I pulled up, I saw Elizabeth's car in the driveway, and another older car I recognized, Lloyd's. Through the living room window I could see them, Elizabeth animated, gesturing wildly, Lloyd looking uncomfortable. As I watched, Elizabeth leaned in close, her voice carrying faintly, even through the glass. Getting back what's hers, she said, her tone fierce. She was preparing to fight back. Seeing Elizabeth and Lloyd together, plotting, hardened my resolve. She wasn't just a victim in her own mind. She was actively strategizing. The next day I called Lloyd. I saw you at the house yesterday, I stated, skipping pleasantries. I'm moving forward with the sale. Immediately. Lloyd sighed, a weary sound. Tessa, I understand your frustration, but your mother is adamant. She claims you promised to transfer it back. She's threatening to deny everything, even go public with some family secrets. Things about your father's will, the inheritance battles after he passed, even some of her financial difficulties from years ago. She's preparing to paint you as the villain. The mention of my father's will, the bitter arguments over his modest inheritance that Elizabeth had drained within a year, sent a cold shiver down my spine. She loved to air dirty laundry, twist facts to suit her narrative. But I wouldn't back down. The deed is in my name, Lloyd. The law is on my side. She can say what she wants, but it won't change the legal reality. Just be prepared, he warned. "This won't be clean." He was right. The following days were a blur of paperwork, real estate agents, and terse phone calls. Elizabeth continued to ignore my direct calls, but she was certainly talking to Amara. One evening, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Amara. "Mom's devastated, Tessa. She says you're trying to ruin her. She's talking about how you've always been jealous, how you're doing this because of Imran. When you destroy her, you destroy us." The words hit me like a physical blow. Destroy us! Amara, my sister, my only sibling, was fully siding with Elizabeth. The rift was complete. I stared at the message, a knot forming in my stomach. It wasn't just Elizabeth I was losing. It was my entire family. A few days later, a plain white envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, just my name typed on the front. Inside, a single sheet of paper, also typed. "Karma has a way of finding those who forget their roots. You will pay for what you're doing." My hands trembled as I read it. Anonymous, threatening. Was it Elizabeth trying to scare me? Or someone else, someone she'd confided in, someone who believed her version of events? The thought that this wasn't just a private family battle, but something that could spill out into the open, was terrifying. The anonymous letter had rattled me more than I wanted to admit, but I pushed through. There was no turning back now. 2 weeks later, the sale was finalized. The buyers were eager, the paperwork signed, sealed, and delivered. The closing was a sterile affair, just me and Lloyd, a notary, and the buyer's agent. Elizabeth was conspicuously absent. The next morning, the movers arrived at Elizabeth's house. I was there, standing on the sidewalk, a pit of dread and grim satisfaction churning in my stomach. I'd given her ample notice, a full month, and even offered to help her find a new place. She'd ignored every call, every text, every letter from Lloyd. She truly hadn't believed I would do it. When the first mover started to carry out a box, Elizabeth burst out of the front door, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. "What is the meaning of this? Get out of my house! Tessa, what have you done?" Her voice carried, echoing down the quiet street. Neighbors started to emerge, drawn by the commotion. Raquel Lewis, 46, our kind neighbor from across the street, stepped onto her porch, her eyes wide with concern. "Mom, I told you," I said, my voice barely a whisper, though I tried to keep it firm. "The house is sold. You need to leave." "Sold!" she shrieked, her voice rising to a theatrical crescendo. "You can't sell my house. This is my home. You heartless child. After everything I've done for you, you throw me out on the street. You're just like your father, selfish and cruel." She turned to the growing audience of neighbors. "Look at her. My own daughter, turning her back on her struggling mother. She's doing this because of that man, that Imran. She's letting him poison her against her own family." The accusations, the public shaming, the blatant self-victimization, it was all classic Elizabeth. My cheeks burned with shame and a deep, aching guilt. Every fiber of my being wanted to retreat, to apologize, to make it all go away. But then I looked at the movers, at the boxes, at the deed I held. I was breaking the chain. I was finally choosing myself. "The house is sold, Mom," I repeated, my voice now stronger. "You have to go." She glared at me, her eyes blazing with a hatred I'd never seen directed so purely at me before. Then she turned and stormed back inside, slamming the door. The movers exchanged uncomfortable glances but continued their work. That evening my phone started buzzing, and buzzing, and buzzing. 19 voicemails in a single day, each one a different shade of anger, disbelief, and finally, desperation. The last one, left late at night, was quiet, broken. Her voice, usually so sharp, was barely a whisper. "Please, not this." Elizabeth's desperate, broken whisper, "Please, not this," haunted me. It played on a loop in my head as Imran and I drove out of the city, heading for the small, charming venue where we were getting married. The sale was done, the house officially out of her hands and mine. I should have felt triumphant, but a heavy cloak of guilt settled over me, chilling me to the bone. Imran, ever perceptive, sensed my turmoil. He reached over and squeezed my hand. "It's okay to feel conflicted, Tessa. You did what you had to do." I nodded, trying to believe him. The ache of losing my family, of knowing Amara had chosen Elizabeth, was a constant throb. Amara hadn't just skipped the wedding. She hadn't responded to any of my attempts to reach out since her devastating text. The silence was deafening, but then there were moments of lightness. Arriving at the venue, seeing the twinkle lights strung between ancient trees, felt like stepping into a different world. My childhood friend, Kyler Fleming, 30, was already there, helping with decorations. She threw her arms around me, her embrace a lifeline. "You look amazing, Tessa, and you deserve all of this." Her unwavering support was a balm. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text message from Raquel, the sympathetic neighbor. "Heard things were rough yesterday. Just wanted to say, your mother isn't the only voice that matters. You have people who care about you too." A small, unexpected kindness that brought a lump to my throat. It was a reminder that the world wasn't just my mother's echo chamber. As the evening wore on, surrounded by the few friends and distant relatives who had shown up, a fragile sense of freedom began to bloom. This was my life, my choice, my future with Imran. The weight of Elizabeth's expectations, her manipulations, felt a little lighter. I tasted self-worth, a flavor I hadn't realized I'd been starving for. The reception was in full swing, music playing, laughter filling the air. Imran and I were slow dancing, lost in the moment, when my phone, tucked away in my small clutch, vibrated. I ignored it at first, but it buzzed again, insistently. I pulled it out, annoyed, and saw a news alert flash across the screen. It was from a local online community forum, one Elizabeth frequented. The headline screamed, "Local woman evicted by heartless daughter after decades of sacrifice." My blood ran cold. Elizabeth had given her side of the story, and the public scorn, I could already feel it, was beginning to swirl. The news alert was a punch to the gut. Elizabeth hadn't just given her side of the story. She'd unleashed a torrent of half-truths and outright lies, painting me as a greedy, ungrateful monster. My phone started buzzing again, this time with messages from old friends, distant cousins, even people I barely knew, all asking, "Is this true?" The public drama had exploded. Strangers were taking sides online, and the scorn felt like a physical weight. Before I could even process the full extent of the damage, a hush fell over the reception. I looked up, following the sudden shift in everyone's gaze. Standing at the entrance to the tent, framed by the twinkling lights that suddenly felt mocking, was Elizabeth. Her eyes, usually so calculating, were wild, her face pale with fury. She was dressed impeccably, as always, but her composure was shattered. Imran immediately stepped in front of me, a protective hand on my arm. Kyler rushed to my side. "Tessa!" Elizabeth's voice, though not a shout, cut through the quiet. Every guest turned, rapt. "How dare you? On your wedding day, you think you can escape what you've done?" She walked slowly, deliberately, towards us, her gaze fixed on me. "You think you can just throw your own mother out of her home and walk away? You think you can marry him and pretend I don't exist?" She stopped a few feet away, her eyes boring into mine. "I'm giving you one last chance, Tessa. Apologize. Undo this sale. Come back to your family. Submit. Or you are dead to me. Forever." The ultimatum hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. My heart pounded, a frantic drum against my ribs. The urge to back down, to appease her, to make the pain stop was overwhelming. For a split second, I saw myself collapsing into her arms, begging for forgiveness, for the conditional love she always offered. But then I looked at Imran, his face etched with worry, but his grip on my arm steady. I looked at Kyler, her eyes silently urging me on. And I remembered the deed, the years of manipulation, the voicemails, the public shaming, the chain, A wave of clarity, cold and sharp, washed over me. "No," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "No, Mom, I won't apologize. I won't undo anything. You want to know why? Because you never loved me, not truly. You loved controlling me. You loved having me dependent on you. You used me for that house, just like you used me for everything else. You've emotionally abused me my entire life, and I'm done." My voice grew stronger with each word, the truth pouring out, raw and unfiltered, for everyone to hear. "This isn't about a house, Mom. This is about me finally choosing myself over your manipulation. And if that means I'm dead to you, then so be it. I'm finally alive to myself." Elizabeth stared at me, her face contorting. For a moment, she looked utterly defeated, then a mask of pure rage settled. "You're nothing without me, Tessa!" she spat, her voice cracking. She spun on her heel and stormed out, disappearing into the darkness. Silence fell, thick and absolute, broken only by the distant chirping of crickets. The silence after Elizabeth stormed off was deafening. Then slowly, tentatively, the music started again. Guests exchanged awkward glances, some offering sympathetic smiles, others looking away. Imran held me close, his warmth a comfort against the sudden chill that had settled over me. Kyler squeezed my hand. The wedding continued, but the air was irrevocably changed. In the days and weeks that followed, the public drama faded. The online forum moved on to its next outrage, but the personal fallout lingered. Amara remained silent. My attempts to reach out, to explain, were met with unread messages and unanswered calls. The family I'd known, however fractured, was now irrevocably broken. The cost of my freedom was deep loneliness. Imran was my rock. "You're free now, Tessa," he'd say, holding me tight. Unscarred? No, but free. He understood the ache that remained, the lingering doubt that sometimes crept in during the quiet hours. Was I right? Was the satisfaction of standing up for myself worth the gaping hole in my family? Raquel sent me a card a week after the wedding, a simple message. "It takes immense courage to break cycles. You did the right thing for yourself." Kyler, over coffee, echoed the sentiment. "She never would have stopped, Tessa. You finally put an end to it." Their affirmations helped, but the wound was still fresh. One quiet evening, a few weeks into our new life together in our own apartment, I found myself scrolling through my old voicemails. Elizabeth's broken whisper, "Please, not this," was still there, a ghost in my phone. I listened to it one last time, the desperation in her voice still able to prick at my conscience. But this time, it was different. It wasn't just a plea. It was the sound of her losing control, something she'd always guarded fiercely. I took a deep breath, my finger hovering over the delete button. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about moving forward. With a final, decisive tap, I erased the voicemail. The empty space felt strangely liberating. Imran called from the kitchen. "Dinner's ready." I walked towards his voice, towards the smell of something delicious, towards our new home, our new marriage. The future was uncertain, yes, and the scars of the past would always be a part of me. But for the first time, that future